Ngozi thought winning the inheritance was the key to rebuilding her life, but money couldn't heal the wounds left behind. As Amara's anger deepens and Emeka returns seeking redemption, Ngozi must confront the true cost of betrayal. Can a broken family ever find its way back together? This is part 2 of their journey, where forgiveness is tested and the heart learns what it means to move on. The mansion in Ikoyi was behind them, but the scars from that life were still very much with them. Months had passed since Ngozi won her court case, securing her father's hidden inheritance and establishing a new beginning for herself and her children. While the financial security had returned, the emotional wounds within her family still ran deep, especially between her and her daughter, Amara. Ngozi's new house in Lagos was modest but comfortable, far from the grandeur of the mansion she once shared with Emeka. Though it was a fresh start, it was not an easy one. Ngozi had used a portion of her inheritance to open a small boutique, selling locally crafted clothes and chin-chin. But the business struggled at first. The local economy wasn't as supportive as she had hoped, and competition was stiff. Some days, she wondered if she could really make it on her own, but giving up wasn't an option. Still, despite the slow progress of her business, the greatest challenges came not from the shop, but from within her own home. Amara, now 17, continued to be distant and bitter. Her anger over losing the luxury lifestyle she once knew in Lagos had only grown. She blamed her mother for their fall from wealth and comfort, making no effort to hide her frustration. "I don't see why I have to help in the shop," Amara said one afternoon, sitting at the kitchen table while Ngozi packed supplies for the store. "If Dad were here, I wouldn't have to work like some village girl." Ngozi's hands froze on the chin-chin bags. The words stung more than she let on. Amara didn't understand how hard she was trying to rebuild their lives, to provide for them with what little she had left. Instead of snapping back, Ngozi took a deep breath. "We're all working hard to rebuild, Amara. This isn't just about money. I'm trying to give us stability." Amara scoffed. "Stability? You call this stable? We used to live in a mansion, Mum. This is your fault. If you hadn't messed things up with Dad, we'd still be living the life we deserve." The anger in Amara's voice hurt, but Ngozi couldn't bring herself to argue. How could she make her daughter see the truth? That it wasn't her fault that Emeka had betrayed them. She simply didn't know how to bridge the growing chasm between them. Amara's resentment had festered into rebellion. She skipped school whenever she could, refused to help around the house, and spent most of her time locked in her room, disconnected from her mother and brother. She missed her friends from her old life and felt embarrassed by their new, more humble lifestyle. She couldn't understand why her mother seemed content with their situation. To Amara, her father represented everything they had lost: wealth, comfort, and status. Whenever Emeka called, he filled her head with stories about how things would have been different if Ngozi hadn't been so stubborn during the divorce. He spoke of how they could have kept the mansion, how Amara could still be attending her elite school, and how he would have provided for them all if only Ngozi hadn't driven him away. Amara clung to these stories. She wanted to believe her father's version of events, even though deep down, something didn't quite add up. Her friends from the old school had started to drift away, and she often found herself alone, scrolling through social media and feeling left behind. But despite these cracks in her confidence, it was easier to remain angry at her mother than to confront the possibility that her father wasn't as blameless as she thought. While Ngozi was battling to keep her business afloat, she was also wrestling with the emotional distance between her and Amara. There were nights she would sit at the kitchen table after closing the shop, staring at the ledger with frustration. The boutique was doing better than it had initially, but every month was a struggle. Sometimes when bills piled up, she would lie awake wondering if she had made the right choice in starting the business at all. Ngozi's thoughts often drifted to the time when Emeka was still in their lives. For all his flaws, he had provided financial security. Without him, she was constantly worried about making ends meet. Sometimes she even caught herself wondering if she had made a mistake by not trying harder to save her marriage. But then she would remember the betrayal, the way Emeka had discarded her so easily, and her resolve would return. She had no choice but to keep moving forward. One night, as Ngozi balanced her accounts, Chimdi came in with a frown on his face. "Mummy, Amara is still angry," he said softly. Ngozi closed her eyes for a moment. "I know, my dear," she replied quietly, "but she needs time to understand." Chimdi's innocent eyes searched his mother's face. "Do you think Dad is the reason why she's like this?" Ngozi hesitated. She didn't want to turn her children against their father, but it was clear that Emeka's influence had been fueling Amara's anger. "Your father has made some mistakes," she said carefully, "but Amara has to find her own way through this. I just have to be patient." Chimdi nodded, though he didn't fully understand. He was the glue that kept them together, always trying to make peace in his small, thoughtful ways. His optimism and support kept Ngozi going, even on the toughest days. Then, one evening, Ngozi's phone rang. It was Emeka. His voice was softer than she remembered, as though something had changed. "Ngozi," he began, "I've been thinking, maybe I made some mistakes." Ngozi stiffened. She had waited for an apology from him for so long, but now that it was here, it felt hollow. There was a pause on the line, and then Emeka continued, "I've been struggling. Things haven't been the same without you and the kids. I want to fix things." Ngozi's heart tightened. For a brief moment, she imagined a different version of her life, one where Emeka had been faithful, where they hadn't been torn apart by greed and betrayal. But that wasn't reality. "No, Emeka," she said, her voice steady but firm. "I've forgiven you, but I've moved on. You had your chance and you made your choices, but I can't be part of your life anymore." Emeka's voice cracked. "Ngozi, I want to come back for the children." "You can build a relationship with Amara and Chimdi," she replied, "but we won't ever be a family again." Emeka's silence on the other end of the phone told her everything. He hadn't expected her to be this strong, to refuse him so firmly. But Ngozi had found her peace, and she wasn't about to let him undo everything she had worked so hard to rebuild. A few days later, Emeka reached out to Amara, painting the same picture of regret and wanting to repair their relationship. At first, she was eager to reconnect. She believed he could restore the life she had lost. But during their conversations, little things started to bother her. Emeka spoke about money, about the inheritance, and how they could have been rich if not for Ngozi's stubbornness. Yet, there was no mention of the emotional hurt or the damage he had caused to the family. As time passed, Amara noticed something else. Her father seemed more interested in the money than in her. He talked about business, about what they could do together once the legal battles were behind him. But when she asked about his relationship with her mother, his answers were evasive. Slowly, Amara started to see through the facade. Her father was using her, just like he had tried to use the inheritance. He didn't care about the family. They were just pawns in his game. One night, after another call with her father, Amara sat in her room, thinking over everything. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that her mother wasn't the villain she had imagined. She thought about the long nights when Ngozi stayed up working on the business, the times her mother had silently endured her anger without lashing back. And suddenly, it hit her. Ngozi had been fighting for them all along, while Emeka had only been fighting for himself. The next morning, Amara hesitated at her mother's bedroom door before knocking. "Mum," she whispered as she entered the room. Ngozi looked up from the book she was reading, surprised to see her daughter standing there, her face serious. "I'm sorry," Amara said softly, her voice shaking. "I've been so horrible to you. I didn't see what was really going on." Ngozi's heart swelled as she stood and pulled her daughter into a hug. "It's okay, Amara," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I forgive you. I've always forgiven you." For the first time in what felt like forever, they stood together, united. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start. The following months saw the gradual healing of the family. Amara began helping out in the boutique, learning to appreciate the value of hard work. She also reconnected with her friends, but now she didn't care as much about wealth and status. She was learning that real value came from within. Chimdi, as always, remained the peacekeeper, his cheerful nature helping to mend the broken bonds. He often acted as the bridge between his sister and mother, helping them find their way back to each other. As for Emeka, he continued to try to build a relationship with the children. Amara, still cautious, kept him at arm's length for a while, but slowly allowed him back into her life. Chimdi, too, forgave him, though both children now saw him in a new light. He was not the infallible figure they once believed him to be. For Ngozi, the journey of healing was ongoing. She knew that the past would always be a part of them, but she had built something new, a life of independence, strength, and peace. The true inheritance her father had left wasn't just money or property. It was the strength to stand tall, to rebuild after the storms of life, and to love deeply, even in the face of betrayal. The end. Thank you for listening. Please like, comment, and share this video.